So I'm reading the Yana the Witch chapter, which is from page 276 first. Almost unnoticed in all of the confusion, a new arrival appeared at the ranch on July 4th. Although she only hung out with the Slippies until the middle of the next month, her presence in the already disintegrating scene proved to be a disaster, not only for her temporary brothers and sisters in the commune, but for 7 other Angelinos who would cease to exist within a few weeks of her brief stay at Spahn. It was Catherine Gypsy Sher who unknowingly set this grim process in motion. Gypsy paid a visit to the young dope dealer Charlie Blackbeard Melton in Topanga Canyon's snake pit. This mystically inclined psychedelic nomad and yoga adept lived together with 2 dropout couples in the canvas roof trailer fashioned from a steak truck. Despite their primitive living conditions, Blackbeard had somehow acquired approximately $23,000, which he generously shared with the local hippies slithering through the snake pit. The standard story is that the dough came from an inheritance, maybe. The musically minded Gypsy entertained the stoned assembly present by strumming Charlie's song Cease to Exist on her guitar. A petite hippie chick, freshly arrived from New England, struck up a conversation with Gypsy. She introduced herself as Linda. The young mother had just recently celebrated her 20th birthday on the summer solstice. She'd come to California to try to patch things up with their estranged husband, Bob Kasabian, currently living with her in Charlie Melton's cramped trailer. Linda was bummed on that very day. The couple had broken up again, after Bob told Linda he didn't want her to accompany the group on a voyage to South America they'd been planning. Linda told Gypsy she was on her way to a July 4th love-in celebration on the nearby beach. She was with her toddler daughter, Tanya, when Gypsy extended the invitation to drop by the Spahn Ranch commune instead. Gypsy later recalled she told the younger girl, "We were a group of people that took care of each other and loved each other, and we were all one." She also mentioned a beautiful man, who she was sure Linda would want to meet. Disenchanted with her failing marriage, Linda later said in one of her few post-trial interviews that she followed Gypsy immediately because she was looking for God. She met Tex Watson instead. According to Linda's mother, Joyce Bird, only 4 months later, right before a police cruiser drove her newly arrested daughter away to face murder charges back in California, Linda said, "Someday the world is going to know the truth." That may well be. But the truth is the last thing Linda ever said about the crimes that she was partially responsible for. During the Tate LaBianca trial, even her former hometown best friend testified that Kasabian was a habitual liar. Linda was proven that her friend's statement was an astute character assessment many times over. Kasabian is absurdly represented in the official narrative as a sweet little flower child in the wrong place at the wrong time. The chance encounter with John Breckenridge, previously referenced, already gave you a glimpse of the tough drug-dealing, thieving speed freak who got away with murder. If you've been indoctrinated into the innocent Linda illusion Bugliosi created, keep in mind that she was originally indicted for 7 counts of murder, and at first, after her arrest, defiantly stated she would never talk. The only reason she agreed to give false testimony was because Bugliosi brokered a deal with her defense attorney, Gary Fleischman, to tell Budge's preferred version of events, rather than anything even remotely close to the truth. As can never be repeated enough, the case against Manson was based entirely on Kasabian's false testimony. Testimony her own lawyer has admitted many times was fiction composed by the prosecuting DA, Vincent Bugliosi. Like so many youngsters seeking a new way of life in the late 60s, California, Linda came from a broken home riven by domestic violence and neglect. She dropped out of school at 16 to get married to one Robert Peasley in 1965. The couple were just as swiftly divorced 6 months later, managing to get into a serious car accident together on their brief journey together. Linda had a penchant for lovers on the wrong side of the law long before she teamed up with Tex. Hubby Peasley's police record includes charges of assaulting a cop, drunken driving, and other violations, though we don't know the details. Peasley divorced his teenage wife, claiming to the court, with support from a doctor's testimony, that she endangered his physical and mental health. Linda vanished for a month, telling her concerned mother that she'd gone to New York. In fact, she was hiding out with other dropout druggy teens in her small hometown of Milford, New Hampshire, in what her mother later described as a hippie pad that nobody in town, including the police, ever knew existed. After a brief reunion with her mother, turned into a constant generation gap shouting match, troubled Linda sought out her father in Florida. It was during her Miami sojourn that she appears to have acquired her lifelong taste for speed. beginning with a pet pill habit. Even the court testimony Kasabian was cleared to present, which was supposed to make her seem like a trustworthy witness, presents a clear picture of her prints a clear picture of her as an experienced drug user and self-admitted drug dealer. She tells the court that in 1965, I started taking grass when I was living with my father. Then right after that, I moved out and started taking heavier drugs. Asked how she managed to live after that, she answers, selling drugs or just people would give me money. I had a boyfriend. She testified she was arrested in 1967 in Boston in the presence of a drug addict and being present when drugs were found. And oh, I think I had some capsules of speed in my pocketbook. Kasabian recalled how in the same year she went to the apartment of a stranger hippie in Haight-Ashbury who turned me onto speed with a needle for the first time. Although the Tate LaBianca murders have gone down in history as the first LSD killings, in fact the long-term speed use of principal instigators Watson and Kasabian makes them rather typical examples of amphetamine-fueled violence. During the trial of her crime partner Tex Watson, Linda testified that she started dropping acid at Sweet 16 and soon added mescaline, psilocybin, peyote cactus, morning glory, and of course speed to her chemical repertoire. The star witness, Bugliosi later cast as a pure heroine fallen among Manson's mind-controlled monsters, was arrested with 4 men in what her mother described as yet another hippie pad on April the 14th, 1967, during a raid by the federal agents and local police in a Boston drug den. The cops nabbed some $20,000 worth of acid, pot, and amphetamine pills. Due to her youth, Linda eluded imprisonment. The record shows that Linda was involved with high-level big stakes narcotics trafficking a full 2 years before she ever came into contact with Jay Sebring, Charles Watson, or Wojtek Frykowski. At 17, she married again, this time to fellow flower child Bob Kasabian, who impregnated her. They were wedded in a hippie ceremony held at Boston's American Psychedelic Circus, one of many communes Linda drifted through on her stone search for meaning. The newlyweds' child, the aforementioned Tanya, saw the light of this world in March 1968 in Venice, California, where the Kasabians had moved to the groovier, if smoggier climes than stuffy old Boston. At some point during this LA stay, Linda befriended Harold True, a sardonic 29-year-old UCLA college student working on his master's degree. He invited the Kasabians, or at least one psychedelic drug party, to the communal home he shared with his friends Al Swerdloff, Ernie Baltzel, and Harry Yost in the wealthy Los Feliz district near Griffith Park. According to Kasabian, this occurred in July 1968, when she and Bob were passing through LA, on the way to yet another hippie community in New Mexico. True had just returned from a trip to Mexico, then and now the center of the illegal marijuana industry. True also knew Blackbeard Charlie Melton and had recently visited his Topanga Canyon trailer concerning a peyote purchase. By his own admission, True was then struggling with a massive amphetamine pill habit, popping as many as 30 dexedrine capsules a day. Speed was Kasabian's drug of choice before and after the murders she helped engineer. Now, at the time, Harold True had already made the acquaintance of Charlie Manson through their mutual friend, former drug smuggler Phil Kaufman, I think you pronounce it, who you will recall bonded with Charlie during their mutual imprisonment in Terminal Island. Where and when exactly Manson met True is unknown, as True cited at least 3 different times and places, all wildly divergent. Of course, like so many in this saga, True was stoned most of the time during this period, so memories are understandably unclear. As far as I could ascertain, Charlie and his girls were guests at Harold True's parties in August of 1968, 1 month after the Kasabians' attendance. Charlie once stayed at the communal party house with True for approximately 10 days, as we will delve into later. Once asked if he and the girls could crash there on a more permanent basis, Manson's lawyer, Irving Kanarak, despite his incompetence as an attorney, was clearly well versed in the narcotics background of the crimes he maintained his client was innocent of. He once said that Harold True was Linda Kasabian's dealer. Like so many of those involved with this murky business, True was still a drug addict at the time of his death decades later. Nobody has ever claimed that Linda ran into the Manson commune a year before she moved into the Spahn Ranch, but a full explanation of the mutual Kasabian-Manson-True's connection significance remains one of the more intriguing puzzles of the case. Of course, what's even more significant to the crime The true dwelling is 3267 Waverley, that Linda and the Manson commune visited separately the same year, was right next door to the house on 3301 Waverley Drive, then owned by the widowed mother of Lino LaBianca. Charlie sometimes claimed he and the other guests wandered from the true house in the neighbouring LaBianca home. It was vacant to bull when it was vacant to bull chicks. There may be some truth to this, but as far as I can determine, LaBianca's mother still lived there for most of the time that Charlie attended the True's drug parties. Lino LaBianca visited his mother there often, so it's not out of the question that Charlie may have run into him at that time. The next year, Lino and his wife Rosemary would move from their residence on Woking Way, the former residence of Walt Disney, to take over the now infamous Waverley address. By that time, True and his buddies hadn't lived on Waverley since their lease ran out in September of 1968. We can only speculate as to how this prior presence of both Kasabian and Manson at True's Waverley home in 1968 ultimately led to Kasabian driving Charlie, Tex, Sadie, Clem, Leslie and Pat to the LaBianca's house next door on August the 10th, 1969. In one post-trial interview with case researcher Judy Hanson, True cryptically said that Linda was from some other trip. The context of his statement tending to disassociate her from the Manson commune. Unhappy in her second marriage, Linda sulked back to her hometown of Milford, New Hampshire, where she was promptly arrested again, this time for a minor but in retrospect relevant violation, charged for driving without a valid driver's license. Considering Bugliosi's later lie that the almost complete stranger Linda was chosen by Manson to be a chauffeur of the CLO Waverley Death Squad simply because she was the only slippy in possession of a driver's license, it's no wonder this little detail was not deemed worthy of bringing up to the jury's attention. In fact, the reason Linda drove to the Polanski and LaBianca residence was because the crimes committed there were partially at her volition. Catherine Gypsy Scher once recalled that Kasabian selected 10050 Cielo Drive as a target on August the 8th, 1969, because she and Charles Watson knew the house well. Some researchers of the crime speculate that when Kasabian boasted to friends back east that since moving to Los Angeles she'd stayed in a movie star's home worth $250,000, she may have been referencing the Polanski residence. It is not at all unlikely that in the course of their drug dealing negotiations, the undiscriminating Wojciech Frykowski may have invited the party and promiscuous young drug dealer to spend the night at Cielo Drive when he was occupying it. May have invited the pretty and promiscuous young drug dealer. Relentless wanderer Linda was lured back to LA from New Hampshire when her husband urged her to reconcile with him. She found Bob camped out on the makeshift trailer in Topanga Canyon with Charlie Blackbeard Melton, who it should be noted was already well acquainted since 1968 with some members of the Manson commune, especially Paul Watkins, whom he'd visited with Charlie at the Spahn Ranch. Melton also already knew Bummer Bob Beausoleil as a Hollywood character, independently of the Spahn set. Even Bugliosi had to admit connections between supposed good hippie Melton and the bad Spahn slippies in Helter Skelter as long ago as 1974. Blackbeard the pirate planned on using his funds to pay for a sailing trip to South America in search of entheogenic drugs. Melton invited Linda, Bob, baby Tanya, and another ecology-minded hippie couple, the Otterstroms, to accompany him on this inner space odyssey. Another incestuous entanglement. Mrs. Otterstrom worked at Topanga's famous Canyon Cafe, operated by a beautiful black-clad bohemian Susan Escovedo, the old lady of Charlie Manson's admirer Neil Young, immortalized in his song Cinnamon Girl. Melton had the poor sense to leave a thick bankroll of his cash planned to fund the sailing trip in his ill-protected gypsy caravan trailer. This lapse in judgment soon proved to have fatal consequences, stretching from Topanga Canyon to Benedict Canyon. Gypsy brought the new long-loved Linda to Spahn, only to find that Charlie wasn't there that day. Linda's daughter Tanya was brought to a separate shack that served as a communal kindergarten. She was to be raised according to the approved Mansonian child-rearing method, influenced by the Scientology precept that children should have little contact with their parents, lest they be negatively imprinted. Parents, he theorized, distorted their children's natural autonomy and innate wisdom. At this time, Charlie quite seriously told visitors to the ranch that his infant son, Sunstone Hawk, aka Michael Valentine Manson, was the true leader of the commune. According to Linda, she experienced plenty of 4th of July fireworks. She claimed the brief visit she'd agreed turned into a 2-day orgy. If we are to believe her, by the time Tex, Bruce Davis, Steve Clem Grogan, Danny DiCarlo, and Beausoleil had their way with the wholesome-looking young mother, she was ready to stay for good. Charlie, after reading this in the 2011 edition of the book, forcefully denied her account to me. As far as he knew, Kasabian became exclusively enchanted with Watson on the first day of her arrival. Both Tex and Linda described their almost immediate sexual union as mind-blowing fusion. Recalling their epic bawling in a Spahn Ranch shack, Linda later recalled Tex was gruff and greasy, but he just always had this beautiful smile and those beautiful eyes. I was attracted to him, and he kind of had me from that first night. Charlie disapproved of the traditional monogamous unions, so the couple's new rapture with commune protocol rankled him. Watson was still smarting from his bitter breakup with Rosina Kroner, a romantic rupture over an abortion that led directly to the vengeful Tex ripping off his ex during the Crow episode, just 4 days before he hooked up with Kasabian. Linda, too, was dissatisfied with her husband, Bob. In Linda, Tex found this new main squeeze and crime partner whose experience in the drug-dealing trade matched his own. In one of the corrections to my previous edition, Charlie suggested was that he felt I'd been far too lenient about Linda. In his view, Kasabian shared equal blame with Tex for the massacre at Polanski's house. He believed that the brisk, bossy attitude egged Tex on to the killing. According to Charlie, Tex was weak. He needed to prove he was a man to her, the only way he knew how. Charlie went so far as to characterize his allowing Kasabian to stay at the ranch simply because he wanted in between her legs as the biggest mistake of my life. The giddy twosome, Tex and Linda, immediately began mixing business with pleasure. In their post-coital pillow talk, Linda told Tex about how she had planned to sail to South America with her husband and Melton, but had lately been excluded from the journey. Money-mind Tex wondered how she had the dough to cover such an ambitious trip. Linda informed a very interested Tex of Melton's windfall lying around the back in Topanga. Tex suggested that some of that bread could go a long way in investing in a new drug he'd heard was hitting the underground market. That was all the encouragement it took for the supposed starry-eyed innocent, who would later be Bugliosi's star witness, to promptly head back to Topanga the next morning on a thievery mission. Some of the commune girls went along with Linda to distract Melton, another precedent for the group drug hassle expedition at Cielo Drive 1 month later. When Linda's husband and Melton went off to procure their passports for the sailing expedition, Linda stole $5,000 in $100 bills, approximately $38,000 in today's currency, from Charlie Melton's duffel bag. She pilfered some acid tabs for good measure. Linda had been getting by through dealing dope since she ran away when she was 16, and that was how she still made ends meet at the time she entered the Spahn fold. I'd seen her 3 times in my life, Manson said. Maybe 2 minutes in my whole life. I seen the broad. She comes up to the ranch for about a week. She says, "Can I stay?" I says, "Can I fuck you?" The biggest thought in my head was getting in her body. I wasn't thinking about sending her to be no troops, saving nothing or stopping nothing. As part of the deal, Kasabian soon participated in Charlie's orchestrated orgy with Brenda and Gypsy. So while 2 minutes is a bit of an exaggeration, it's true that Kasabian, save for the obligatory sex Manson expected in exchange for lodgings, barely knew the cult leader. She would later place in prison with her carefully coached testimony. She spent a little over 1 month at the ranch before fleeing right before August the 16th raid. The idea that Manson would have entrusted the practical stranger Kasabian, whose loyalty and criminal know-how he had yet to be demonstrated, to carry out such a risky venture as the fictional Helter Skelter was imagined to be, is one of the unlikeliest aspects of the myth. Linda was, however, a frequent companion of Watson in that time. Tex was more and more on the outs with Manson. He was starting to see how drastically the Crow shooting had altered his life. Kasabian soon replaced the apparently expendable Rosina Kroner as Tex's partner in crime, and it was in that capacity that she became the getaway driver for the Cielo caper. As we'll see, Kasabian, who'd already proven herself capable of robbing her own friend, Charlie Melton, had a vested interest in participating in the Cielo Drive drug robbery, which had nothing to do with igniting the Black-White Revolution, mentioned so frequently at the trial, With her arrival on the 4th of July, the entire cast for the coming cataclysm had been assembled. Catherine Capistrano Gillies, one of the most honest commune survivors among the few who remained loyal to Manson, consistently expressed her hatred of Kasabian. Gillies characterized Kasabian as a troublemaking interloper and an outsider instrumental in destroying the commune she never really fit into. Cappy never failed to make it clear in her few public statements that in her view the angry and spiteful Linda was the key instigator of the murders. Though Gillies never did state precisely what she thought Linda's motive was, Cappy shamelessly admitted many times that she regretted not being invited to go along for the slaughter. According to Manson, the shrewd Bugliosi later twisted Kasabian to testify against him by threatening to have Tanya taken away by social services if she didn't comply. In 1970, Phil Kaufman, then very much involved in the goings-on for the Mansons' arrest, confirmed that the prosecution had exerted pressure on several of the girls to support their case against Manson as the Helter-Skelter preaching cult leader with this tactic. Twice they took Mary Bruner's child away. They took Sadie's and they took Linda Kasabian's. Now they're going to give back Linda's and drop all the charges against her. They took Linda to a Chinese dinner. The assistant district attorney took her out of jail last week, took her out to the scene of the two alleged crimes, and on the way back bought her a Chinese dinner in a restaurant. They're dropping the charges if she gives them information. Why Kasabian agreed to spout the nonsense she put forth in court is easy to understand. She faced a stark choice: a Chinese dinner and complete immunity, or a last meal in the gas chamber. It's easy to cast aspersions on the treacherous characters of Kasabian, Atkins, Bruner, and many others, who swiftly agreed to turn mostly manufactured state's evidence against Manson. But it must be kept in mind that these young women, unversed in attorney tactics, have been subjected to tremendous pressures by a ruthless prosecution team, willing to do whatever was needed to accomplish their aims. Manson may have strived to create a new Cosa Nostra with all of the attendants' ironclad loyalties that implies, but he learned to his peril there's a good reason why the mob doesn't make a habit of placing 19-year-old girls on a permanent acid trip in positions of trust. The more experienced criminal associates of Sebring and Wachowski, on the other hand, were practiced in playing the game and knew how to maintain absolute silence. So yeah, a lot to unpack there.